The winter of 1986 was unusually silent in our village. Even the birds seemed to have stopped chirping, and the pond on the western edge of the village looked like a sheet of black glass under the dim sky. It was on one such evening that Minthu, a boy of barely 15, vanished without a trace. He had gone out after lunch, his mother recalled later, to fetch some firewood near the fields. Hours passed, and when dusk crept in, his family began to worry. By the time the sun disappeared behind the line of palm trees, the entire neighborhood was out searching, holding lanterns and calling his name into the cold wind. Minthu, Minthu. Their voices echoed back from the empty paths, but there was no answer. Finally, near the pond, under the shadow of an old banyan tree, two men spotted something on the ground. It wasn't a bundle of firewood. It wasn't a sack of rice. It was Minthu. He was lying there, not dead, but not quite alive either. His body was stiff and cold to the touch. His eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites, and his limbs were twisted unnaturally, as if some invisible force had bent them. His lips were moving faintly, but no sound came out, only a strange hiss, like steam escaping from a kettle. The villagers shouted for help. His mother came running barefoot, screaming his name. They carried him back to his house, and for a moment everyone thought it must be some sudden fever or snakebite. But as the minutes went by, the boy began to convulse violently. His temperature soared, his body shuddered, and his eyes remained fixed in that terrifying white stare. The family wasted no time. They called doctors from the nearby town. One came, then another, and then a third. Each examined the boy, listened to his chest, checked his pulse, and whispered among themselves. They prescribed medicine, injections, prayers, but nothing worked. On the third day, the last doctor wiped his glasses, looked at Minthu's father, and said in a low, hesitant voice, "This is not a medical illness. This is something else. Something beyond our field." The words fell into the room like stones into deep water. His mother collapsed, wailing. The neighbors exchanged glances of dread, and Minthu lay there, trembling and staring at nothing, his breath shallow, his hands curled like claws. The ordinary life of the village was about to slip into something it had never known before, into a darkness that was not of this world. Days passed, and Minthu's condition only worsened. His fever burned like fire, his body twisted in ways no human body should, and at night, strange whispers filled the house. His mother swore she saw shadows moving across the walls, though no lamp was lit. His father sat outside with his head in his hands. The doctors had left. The neighbors were afraid to enter after dusk. Then Minthu's uncle, a tall, weary man named Karim, decided to take matters into his own hands. Someone had told him of a huger, a learned man who dealt not only with scriptures, but also with the unseen world. This huger had once expelled an evil spirit from a whole household, they said. Karim clung to that rumor like a drowning man to a straw. He traveled for miles to find the huger. The man lived on the edge of a marshland in a crooked house made of old bamboo. When Karim explained the boy's condition, the huger listened silently, his fingers moving over a string of dark wooden beads. When Karim finished, the huger raised his head, his eyes deep and unreadable. "This is not an ordinary illness," he said finally. "This is the work of beings that live between worlds. I cannot leave at once, but I will prepare pani pour water infused with protective verses. Give it to the boy. It may help hold back the darkness until I come." Karim thanked him, took the bottle of water wrapped in white cloth, and mounted his old bicycle. The sun was already leaning toward the horizon. The road back to the village cut through rice fields and thin forest. It was quiet, too quiet. Only the distant cry of a crow and the crunch of gravel beneath the bicycle wheels. Halfway home, Karim felt at first a sudden drop in temperature, as if he had entered a room of ice. The hair on his arms stood on end. The evening light dimmed unnaturally, and the shadows stretched long and strange. Then, at a bend in the road, he saw them. 6 shapes, tall, black, motionless. They stood across the road like a wall of shadow, each shape taller than a man, their outlines blurred as though they were carved from smoke. No eyes, no faces, just elongated, wavering darkness. Kareem's breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled on the handlebars. The bicycle wobbled. He tried to steer around them, but as he moved, the shapes seemed to shift, sliding soundlessly across the road, blocking every path. It was like staring into a nightmare while awake. Then his front wheel hit a stone. The bicycle lurched violently. Kareem cried out and toppled to the ground, the bottle of water clattering beside him. Pain shot through his shoulder. By the time he scrambled to his knees, the road was empty again. The 6 shapes were gone. So was the bottle. He looked everywhere, under the bushes, in the ditch, on the road, but the bottle of Pani Pour had vanished. His heart pounded. Cold sweat rolled down his back. He whispered a prayer under his breath and climbed shakily back onto his bicycle. Behind him, the rice field stood silent and dark, and the wind that brushed his face felt like icy fingers. When Kareem finally reached Minthu's house, his clothes were torn and his face pale. He stammered out what had happened. The family listened in stunned silence. 6 shadows, he repeated, his eyes wide, tall as palm trees. They stood in the road, and then, the bottle. It was gone. That night no one in the house slept. Outside, the wind moaned like a living thing. And deep in the back room, Minthu shivered and muttered in a language no one could understand, as though the very beings that had appeared to his uncle were now hovering over his bed. By the time Kareem's story of the 6 black shapes spread through the village, fear had taken root like a poisonous vine. People began avoiding the path near the pond. Women whispered prayers at night and covered their children with amulets. Even the dogs stopped barking after dark, as if they, too, could sense something crawling through the air. Minthu was getting worse. His skin had taken on a grayish hue, and he sometimes sat bolt upright in bed at night. His eyes still rolled back, speaking in a guttural, broken tongue that none of them recognized. His mother clutched his hands, crying, "What are you saying, Baba? What are you saying?" But the boy's lips kept moving, as if someone else was speaking through him. Desperation drove the family to seek one last help. A kobiraj, spiritual healer known for dealing with dangerous forces. He lived several villages away, and was rumored to be both brave and stubborn. When Kareem went to meet him, the kobiraj listened without flinching, his weathered face like a stone idol. After a long pause, he said, "This is not one spirit. It is 6. 6 jinn bound together. They do not usually act in unison, but here, they have merged. That is why the boy's body is breaking. That is why your Huser's water disappeared. They are powerful, very powerful. I should not come." Kareem fell at his feet. "Please," he begged. "He is only 15. If you don't come, he will die." The kobiraj closed his eyes, muttering prayers under his breath. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I will come, but understand this work will take 3 days, and each day will test us. If the ritual is broken, the consequences will be grave, not just for me, but for all of you." On the first morning, the kobiraj arrived at Minthu's house. He carried a bundle wrapped in red cloth, incense, black seeds, small clay pots of oil, and pages of scripture bound in thread. His eyes scanned every corner of the courtyard before he stepped inside. The air seemed heavy, like a room before a thunderstorm. He began at once. He sprinkled water in the corners of the room, burned incense that gave off a bitter, metallic smell, and murmured incantations in a low, steady tone. The villagers gathered outside, peering in through the doorway, their faces pale. That night, Minthu's convulsions eased slightly. For the first time in weeks, his breathing became steady. His mother fell at the kobiraj's feet, weeping with relief. The healer only raised his hand and said, "It is not over." This was only the first step. The second day, the kobiraj drew symbols with ash on the boy's wrists and forehead. He scattered mustard seeds around the bed and bound Minthu's fingers with thin cotton threads, chanting louder this time. Outside, a strange stillness settled over the yard. No wind, no birds, no sound except the steady rise and fall of the kobiraj's voice. But as dusk approached, a strange heaviness began to press on everyone present. The shadows in the corners deepened unnaturally. The house creaked as though something were moving inside the walls. Minthu's father whispered, "Do you feel it?" His wife nodded, clutching their younger children close. The kobiraj's face remained unreadable, but his voice grew sharper, more urgent. When he finished the day's work, he stood and looked at the family. "Tomorrow is the final day," he said quietly. "The jinn will not stay silent. They will fight back. You must obey me completely. If you do not, the boy will be lost, and so may you." That night, the kobiraj slept in a small room at the back of the house, and in his dreams, something came to him. Not one thing, but six. 6 shadows with burning eyes, speaking in a single voice. They hissed a warning. "Stop. Leave the boy. This is ours. If you continue, you will suffer." The kobiraj woke drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. Outside, the village slept under a moonless sky. Inside, the boy stirred restlessly, his lips moving as though he too had heard the warning. But the kobiraj had already decided. He would not stop. He would finish the ritual, no matter what the cost. The third morning rose without sunlight. The sky above the village was the color of old iron, heavy and low. Even the pond, usually alive with ripples and dragonflies, looked flat and dead. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some had seen dreams of black shapes in their courtyards. Others heard scratching at their doors during the night. It felt as though the whole village had fallen under a silent siege. The kobiraj emerged from his room before dawn. His face looked drawn, his eyes shadowed, but his hands were steady. He carried with him a small clay pot filled with oil, a copper bowl of water, and a bundle of dried leaves bound in red thread. He didn't greet anyone. He simply said, in a low voice that left no room for argument, "Today is the final day. I will make a circle in the courtyard. All of you must stay inside it. No matter what happens, no matter what you see, what you hear, do not step out. If you leave the circle, you invite the jinn." The family nodded nervously. The neighbors who had gathered to watch crossed themselves or muttered prayers. Children clung to their mother's saris. In the center of the yard, the kobiraj took a stick and traced a wide circle in the dust. He sprinkled mustard seeds along its edge and poured the oil from the pot in a thin, unbroken line. Then he placed the copper bowl of water at the circle's heart and lit the dried leaves. A sharp, bitter smoke rose, curling like fingers into the gray morning. Minthu sat inside the circle, slumped against his mother, his eyes half closed but restless. His skin was slick with sweat. Sometimes his lips moved, whispering words in a language no one recognized. The kobiraj knelt and began his chant, his voice low at first, then rising in waves like the tide. At first, everything was still, only the smoke moved, twisting upward. But slowly, the air began to thicken, as if invisible hands were pressing down on it. The trees surrounding the yard shuddered without wind. Leaves dropped silently, not fluttering, but plunging straight down as though pushed. Then the voices started, faint at first, like murmurs from the bottom of a well, then louder, male and female voices together, whispering, laughing, hissing. The sound didn't come from outside, it came from everywhere. "Leave the circle. Get out. Run to the house. The boy is ours." The family huddled together, clutching one another's arms. A young cousin began to cry. His mother hushed him, her voice trembling. "Stay still. Don't move." The kobiraj's chanting grew louder, faster, sweat rolling down his forehead. The smoke thickened, filling the courtyard with a bitter, metallic scent. The copper bowl of water trembled on the ground as though something were moving beneath it. Then it happened. The trees at the edge of the yard bent sharply, their branches cracking, as though some great weight were pressing them down. Dust rose in a sudden gust, though there was no wind. From nowhere, a sound like deep laughter rolled across the courtyard, shaking the walls. 2 of the older relatives broke, their faces pale with terror. They scrambled to their feet. "I can't stay here," one of them gasped. "I'm going inside." They darted toward the house. "Stop," the kobiraj roared without looking up. "Do not break the circle." But it was too late. The moment their feet crossed the line of oil and mustard seeds, a sound like 1,000 birds taking flight filled the yard. The smoke twisted violently, and the shadows at the edges of the circle lengthened, reaching toward the fleeing relatives like fingers. Inside the circle, Minthu jerked upright with a scream, a high, inhuman sound. His eyes rolled back completely white. His hands clawed at the air as though something invisible was pulling him upward. His mother tried to hold him down, but felt only cold air where his body should have been. The kobirajs' voice rose to a shout, his chant breaking into sharp, commanding syllables. His eyes were closed tight, his hands moving in intricate gestures. For a moment, the air seemed to solidify like the entire courtyard was caught in amber, but then a rush of icy wind blew through, extinguishing the burning leaves. The smoke was sucked upward in a spiral. The copper bowl overturned, spilling the water into the dust. The kobiraj's eyes snapped open, and before anyone could react, something invisible seized him. His body jerked as though a hook had been driven into his chest. With a cry, he was lifted from the ground, dragged across the courtyard, and hurled beyond the circle into the darkness beyond the trees. The family screamed, and in the center of the circle, Minthu's body rose slowly, as if pulled by unseen hands. His feet left the ground, his head fell back, his mouth open in a silent scream. The voices around them grew deafening now. 6 voices speaking as one, echoing through the air. He is ours. You cannot take him. For a moment, the world held its breath. The courtyard seemed to shrink, the circle of oil and mustard seeds, now just a trembling line between life and something far darker. The family knelt inside, eyes wide with terror, their lips moving in frantic prayers. Minthu floated a few feet above the ground, his limbs stiff, his head tilted back unnaturally, his mouth stretched in a silent scream. Outside the circle, the trees bent toward the yard, branches reaching like claws. The voices, 6 of them, male and female, old and young, laughing and weeping, rose into a single howl that rattled the bamboo walls of the house. The air was so cold that the family's breath came out in clouds. The kobiraj's body lay somewhere in the dark, but his voice impossibly still echoed faintly, as if he were chanting from far away. The family could barely hear him. Hold the circle. The circle must not break. The mother, though trembling, crawled to the edge of the circle and grabbed the copper bowl, now empty. With shaking hands, she refilled it from a nearby water pot, dipped her fingers into the oil, and smeared it across her forehead. As she'd seen the kobiraj do, she didn't know the words, but she began to chant, her voice breaking, desperate. Allah, save my son. Allah, save my son. The boy's body twisted in the air. For a heartbeat, his eyes flicked open. They were no longer white, they were black, endless. The 6 voices spoke again, but this time closer, as though they were inside every listener's head. He is our gate. When he leaves the circle, we will cross. Do not fight. The mother's chanting became a scream. She reached up and grabbed Minthu's ankle, pulling him down. His body was icy cold, but solid. For an instant, she felt something pulling back, something vast and heavy. Her hands burned as though she were gripping hot iron, but she did not let go. And then something shifted. The wind died abruptly. The shadows at the edge of the yard froze like painted shapes. The 6 voices faltered. From the darkness beyond the trees came the sound of a bell. A slow, heavy toll, deep and ancient. The villagers later swore they hadn't seen it clearly. Only flashes, a tall, faceless figure stepping into the courtyard, draped in white cloth, carrying a staff of ashwood. It moved silently, and where it walked, the oil of the circle flared up in a thin, bright flame. The figure raised the staff once. A sound like tearing cloth ripped through the air. The 6 voices screamed together, a shriek that shook the earth. Black shapes, like smoke, but heavier, tore themselves from Minthu's body, rising like crows into the air. Each shape had a face. For a second, old, young, male, female, and then it dissolved. One by one, the 6 shadows shot upward and vanished into the gray sky. Minthu collapsed into his mother's arms. His body was limp but warm. He began to cry softly, like a normal child waking from a nightmare. His lips moved, but the words were now his own. Ma, ma. The white figure lowered the staff and stepped backward. No one saw it leave. It was simply gone, as though it had never been there. The oil fire went out. The circle returned to a line of dust and mustard seeds. Silence fell. The trees stood still. The air lost its coldness. The family clung to one another, tears streaming down their faces. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a rooster crowed, though dawn was still far away. When the villagers dared to emerge from their houses, they found the kobiraj sitting at the edge of the pond, drenched in sweat, his clothes torn. He was alive, though pale as ash. He refused to speak of what he had seen beyond the trees. He only said, in a hoarse voice, "The 6 jinn are gone, for now, but their gate must never open again." That night became a whispered legend. For years afterward, people avoided the old courtyard after dark. Mothers told their children not to wander near the trees at sunset. And when anyone asked Minthu about that night, he would only shake his head. Sometimes, when he thought no one was listening, he would murmur in his sleep a name no one recognized, in a language no one spoke. But he grew strong. The fevers never returned. He lived. But the villagers always said his shadow sometimes moved just a heartbeat slower than his body. Even today, when a cold wind rattles the leaves at dusk, the elders of the village tell the story of the 6 shadows and the boy who almost became their gate. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.